What's up, everyone? My name's Ben. I'm a software developer, and this is episode number 2 of my journey for building my first SaaS app. Now, if you didn't see episode 1, basically I've announced that I'm going to build in public my first SaaS app. I've never done this before, so bear with me. I'm trying to be organized. I'm trying not to waste anybody's time or make videos that are too long or not interesting. But today, heading into episode 2, week 2, I want to talk about something very foundational and very important to your project, which is picking your tools and your framework. So what are the components and what are the things that you'll need to think about as you're approaching this? First is cost. You want some kind of technology and tech stack that is easy for you to afford, especially if you're bootstrapping. You want technologies that you're going to be able to maintain and also use to write something that's maintainable. You're going to want it to be able to scale as you pick new users up, hopefully. We all hope for that. And you're going to want something that you enjoy working with and something that's going to feel productive to you. And so my background, I did the whole computer science thing at a university, and so I have a broad spectrum of languages, especially after being in the industry for 12 years, that I've used and I've experience with. I did C++ at my university, a tad bit of Java. Out in the field, I've done PHP, Python, C#, JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever. It was basically unavoidable at this point. And so I have a big, portfolio to pick from. And so a lot of things to think about in terms of what's going to be best, what's going to produce the best product, what am I going to be happiest developing with. And top 3 right off the bat, PHP Laravel, great combination. Django Python, I've done a lot of custom applications on top of that. Great framework, very productive, pretty enjoyable to use. And then there's ASP.NET Core with the MVC framework, which seems like an odd one, but as you'll find out, I'm actually going that way. I am going to use ASP.NET Core MVC for my SaaS project. And to find out a little bit more about this curious choice, well, I'm going to get into all that. So in addition to just picking a framework, there's a lot of other things you got to think about when you're building a SaaS app and you're launching it. Unless you're just going to throw the shit on Vercel or whatever and let them deal with it and then potentially get, a $10,000 bill or whatever. There's a lot of things you need to think about. So one of those things is, speak of the devil, your hosting environment, what you're going to want to host this application on. Now, I've been a big fan of AWS over the years, particularly Lightsail, which is sort of like a budget EC2. Everything's all set up. There's not you're not paying for network interfaces or anything like that. You're not paying per egress or ingress or whatever. There are some limits on it, but it's just nicely defined. So if that's you, Lightsail is probably a good option. I would recommend it. The costs are fixed too, so the tiers they're fixed cost tiers. So you don't have to worry about also having a $5,000 AWS bill because your thing got really popular overnight. Again, something we all hope for. And it's also got flexibility for you to pick whatever OS you need and all that. It's really good. Lately though, I've gotten kind of away from using AWS and I've started colocating servers. This is something that I will talk about in a future video. So if you're interested in how I've been colocating servers and doing so very affordably, hit subscribe. While you're here, leave me a thumbs up on this video. Show me some support. If you've got thoughts about anything I'm talking about, drop a comment. Let's get some discussion going about all this stuff. So I've been colocating servers and frankly, I love it. I want to keep doing that. It's something so cool about colocating a server having it sent up to a data center, and like you just have full control over the hardware, and you can throw as much hardware onto it as you want. So for me, for this SaaS app that I'm building, I'm going to do the same thing. My plan is, and I've already done a little bit of research into this, but you can get used Dell servers, and I'm talking like 48 core beast used Dell servers in a 1U configuration. Just load it down with RAM, like 64 gigs of RAM or more, whatever, right? Dual power supplies and all that. You can do this for like under $1,500. Like there's providers out there and whatever that, you know, like government, school, education, you know, private industry or whatever, they want to liquidate old hardware. Well, all this hardware is good enough to be running Linux on, which is another thing, right? Like the OS, I'm planning on running Linux to host this on. Like I'm not going to run Windows Server or anything. I'm gonna run Linux. So it's probably going to be Debian Linux at that. So you can get this super powerful server for a one-time fixed cost of like less than $1,500, and configure it however you want, however many processor cores you want, however much RAM you want, disk space, redundant power supplies. Again, configure it however you want, and send it up to a colocation center, and again host it usually for a fixed price per month. And it gives you insane amounts of resources that would cost thousands of dollars a month on AWS. I mean, imagine what a 48 core server on AWS would cost. I don't even thousands of dollars a month. It would be insane. For me, again, I'm gonna get a used server that's, you know, liquidated from somewhere, government, whatever. I'm gonna load it down with specs, build something really powerful, really, you know, beastly with it, and install Debian on it and send it up to a data center. So now that we talked a little bit about hosting environment and what I'm gonna do and what my plan of action is gonna be, let's talk about like languages and frameworks. So again, my experience, PHP, Python, C# across my professional career. PHP, I've let go a little bit by the wayside. I've done some stuff with Laravel. It's a great framework, and I mean, man, if you're comfortable with it, like, use that. You can do so much so quickly with that, and it's just really nice to use. And the learning curve is really not bad at all. Probably the framework in combination I have the most experience with shipping custom applications on is Django and Python. But then recently, when I started working on Umbraco and doing Umbraco work, that got me kind of a little bit more interested in checking out more recent versions of ASP.NET Core and the MVC framework in C#, all of which is also now open source and runs on Linux. So narrowing it down, we've now got Python and C#, and not to like drag this out any longer, I decided to pick C#. And there was several reasons for that. Again, it seems like an odd language to be picking for like a bootstrapped SaaS startup, but whatever, I'm gonna run with it. And this is the reason why. These are the reasons why. The first is performance. Django Python has never been particularly a slow framework. It responds very well, and very fast, very well. But when I started working with ASP.NET and C# for Umbraco projects, I was just mind blown at how responsive and how quick the whole ASP.NET Core stack is in terms of processor usage, in terms of memory usage, and then again, just in terms of responsiveness and snappiness. It's like, I don't know, it's like a grain of sand in the wind. It's like nothing. It's like whisper quiet. So it's whisper quiet, we'll put it that way, compared to the usage I see on like Django Python or whatever. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit more kludgy. And again, performance is not bad, usually, unless you're putting on like a server that's way too small for what you're doing. But that's why I decided to go with the .NET and the C# side of things. Or the primary reason why. The other reason why I picked ASP.NET and C# is because C# is a strongly typed language, which you know, it reduces a whole, and I'm really not a stickler about this. There's people out there in the development community who are like all big about type safety now after I don't know, we went through like a decade of collective amnesia about, you know, the benefits of type safety, because just fuck it, throw a Ruby app together, or throw a Python app together, or, you know, now JavaScript's cool and everybody's doing JavaScript and whatever, right? Everybody just tossed the type systems aside for like a decade, and now came back to it as if it's like an important thing, and it just makes me laugh or whatever. But to their point, to their credit, it really does help with both maintenance, and then also just eliminates a whole category of errors that can come up when you're you know, running the application and trying to keep it going and extending it and building upon it. The other thing too is with the type safety, it does make it a little bit easier to reason about your application as it grows and gets bigger and blooms outward. So you'll have a better idea of, okay, if I change this, you know, what are the side effects going to be of me changing, you know, this property name or whatever, this variable. The compiler will likely tell you, and you'll be able to fix it before anything hits production. So that's another reason why I wanted to, or why I went with ASP.NET for this project. The other thing is scalability. I wanted something that, as my application grows, as my user base grow, which it will, it's going to, I believe in it. As it grows, I wanted something that could handle the load and not buckle. And again, with something like Django Python, you basically just have to keep throwing more server resources at it. You have to, you know, set up multiple application servers and start doing load balancing. And then you run into, you know, the database connectivity issues and your database server getting pegged, and then that needs more resources. And then so now you're starting this cycle where it's just like spend more money. All the time and effort and sweat that you didn't put in up front dealing with the type system and crap, you're now paying for it in like forever, right? In perpetuity across time. So the C#, ASP.NET and C#, just because it's so efficient, it seems to, at least in my experience thus far, scale really well and use system resources very, very efficiently. Essentially, I'm trying to put a very quick, fast, efficient language on top of like a 48 core server. It's going to be pretty dope. It's going to be very fast. And so for framework, this kind of goes into it too. Like the MVC framework, if you haven't checked it out for ASP.NET, it's actually pretty great, and it really doesn't feel all that different than, you know, if you can handle a Django app, I feel like you probably can really easily handle an ASP.NET core application as well using the MVC framework. There are some gripes that I have with ASP.NET Core. In particular, it has to do with the conventions on things. I would prefer to organize my projects in different ways and whatever versus its conventions. But the good news is that the framework is flexible enough that you can reorganize and run it however you want. And I've done a little bit of a hybrid. The conventions in ASP.NET MVC definitely do cut down on a good chunk of the boilerplate and whatever you'd have to otherwise do and set up. And so another quirky choice, and I might as well just go over this now outside of using .NET for a SaaS startup, is the libraries I'm going to be using on the front end side. I decided to completely jettison React, Vue, all that stuff. The front end is going to be straight HTMX and then JavaScript wherever I need a little bit of interactivity. A lot of people will pair up something like Alpine.js with HTMX to kind of have a little bit of interactivity or reactivity feeling inside of their application. Some people will use HyperScript, which I've also used. But in this case, like all I feel like I really need is the HTMX library and a little bit of DOM manipulation. So that's going to keep my libraries and my dependencies, minuscule. They're going to be minuscule. The next biggest thing after picking a framework and a language is picking your database. So a natural choice for something like ASP.NET would be Microsoft SQL Server. And there's several tiers of products in there. There's a free one called Microsoft SQL Server Express, which again, it's free. That's great. It gives you access to all the features of the database server without any like crazy restrictions, again, in terms of features. The restrictions come in other ways. So the database size is limited to 10 gigabytes, and this is the killer for me out of everything. The RAM, the amount of RAM memory that the database process can use is capped at 1.4 gigabytes, which, I don't know, at this point in time, like they need to bump that threshold up a little bit. And they need to do it because I think that they're going to continue to just lose any kind of traction against the open source databases, because the open source databases have gotten so good at this point. Okay, so let's say you outgrew Express. Well, then you have to bump up to the standard edition of Microsoft SQL Server, and that's licensed in two ways, either per user seat, or particularly for web applications, which is what I'm going to be building here, they want you to license it by core, by like the number of processor cores that are inside of your server. So my understanding is that you have to buy a pack of cores, and each pack of cores it licenses 2 cores, and all of the cores inside of your system have to be licensed. And the license per pack, per 2 cores, is about $2,000. So let's say that you wanted to install it on a server, on a Linux server, which you can run SQL Server on a Linux server now. But let's say you wanted to install it on a server that had 8 cores on it, right? You're going to be essentially buying $4,000 worth of licenses just to run a database in order to be using SQL Server Standard. Now again, every core on that server box has to be licensed if you're using the core licensing model, which for most bootstrapped SaaS startups, like what I'm doing, that's totally out of the picture. Like I cannot afford that. That's a huge risk. That would be putting me out like big time. Like that's a huge risk. So even just starting on Express and saying, oh, well, by the time I get enough users that the database will be pegged too much and I'll have to upgrade and whatever, like it's way too much of a risk. And then the pricing only goes up from there, whether you get, you get data center or enterprise edition or whatever, like it's a non-starter. The other option is using an open source database, and the two biggest are going to be MariaDB or Postgres database. So looking at both of them, they're both very, very solid options, and you can integrate both of them. There's connectors for both of them in .NET that are also very solid. So how to differentiate and how to pick what's best? Well, for me, and this may be the case for other people who are building SaaS applications, both of them are very good at doing relational database, any kind of relational database schemas inside of them and handling those. Very good. And in some cases, I think MariaDB is actually faster than Postgres. Postgres can be tuned so that it can kind of have that same performance as MariaDB, but they're both very, very good at handling relational database kind of workloads. Where Postgres kind of comes in handy is that it can handle JSON, and it handles it in a binary format really, really, really well. So essentially Postgres can give you the relational database tables when you need it, but then you can also in effect treat it as a document database when you might need that kind of functionality for whatever you're building. So for me, it basically narrowed down my choice into Postgres, and I've locked into that at this point. And Postgres has great support on .NET. There's providers that you can hook into Entity Framework, which is the biggest .NET ORM that's out there. I don't know biggest, but it's definitely one of the most popular ORMs out there. It's got, like I said, it's got excellent providers for that. It allows you to write link queries just like you could otherwise. It allows you to use the migration system. And you can also drop down into SQL if you wanted to. But it seems like it's really a really tight fit. And I don't think I'm going to miss not using, Microsoft SQL Server too much. But that could be famous last words for all I know. And so piggybacking off of that discussion about database, I also wanted to talk a little bit about how this project that I'm working on now and building in public with you, interested viewer, I hope there's some interested viewers out there, either now or later, is that this is actually my second attempt at building this SaaS product. What I'm building has a very content-heavy aspect to it. And so my initial thought and my initial, the thing I initially wanted to build this on top of was Umbraco. I was going to build a SaaS product on top of Umbraco and build a custom package or plugin or extension, if you will, that was on top of the CMS and would do what I needed it to do. The thing that killed it was that Umbraco supports two databases, either SQLite or Microsoft SQL Server. And again, I just can't afford those licensing fees for that. Like, I can't do it. So essentially, I had a working product on top of Umbraco. It was, basically fulfilled all my hopes and dreams and proved that the concept would work. But I basically had to, not throw it away, but set it aside and just build a web application from scratch and build those content facilities myself. And this is where the document database comes in handy. It saves a lot of database engineering work that needs to happen. So again, this is why Postgres is just, the best option, I think, for me. What's coming up next? Well, this week I'm going to continue to work on this application, and then hopefully next week I'll be able to go over a little bit about the thinking behind what I'm building, and also just what I'm building in general. So if you're curious about what I'm building, if you want to see that, again, subscribe to my channel. I think this is the third time I've said this in this video. Subscribe to it. Leave a thumbs up. Help me get some reach. Help me, grow this thing, and let's have some good discussions about this. This is going to be interesting, especially if you've never done anything like this before. Like, you can learn from my mistakes as I go. So with that said, I will see you in the next one. So tune in next week. I'm going to put out another video talking about what I've run into thus far, and hopefully give you a little bit better idea of what I'm building.